Our kids like these inflatable wading pools, but they always seem to get shred by some animal at some point in the night. And I've tried taping them up, it's pretty much impossible, they always leak, so I'm going to make a new one out of wood, sort of. And I designed this one to be hexagonal because it's a cool shape and a good compromise between number of cuts and good use of material. Got my drawings printed out, and I'm going to need 2 of these 2x4s and 2 of these wide boards. And often ripping 2x4s, they end up pinching the blade, so I'm only cutting partial depth, then putting a shim in there, and then cutting the rest of the way. Except this 2x4 didn't have any stress in it, so all that was unnecessary. And then cutting a 60-degree miter on the ends of all the pieces that are from the 2x4s. And with the blade tilted 30 degrees, cutting a similar bevel on the ends of the boards, but also with a fence at an angle, so this is a compound miter. That's because the whole thing is going to be tapered. And then checking that cut against my drawings, because it's so easy to get that sort of thing backwards, but fortunately it wasn't. And the other end of the boards just gets some miter, much less error prone. And just putting a slight chamfer on the corners that'll kind of stick out. Easier to do that now than after it's assembled. And the 7-degree bevel on the long edges of the boards, which I'm doing with my jointer. Except my jointer fence doesn't tilt, but just putting a couple of bar clamps on that fence gets me to just the right angle. And I flipped this board end over end to get to the other side when I realized, whoops, it needs to be flipped along its axis. Fortunately noticed just in time. Now I gotta nail these boards at an angle to my 2x4 pieces like that. And that's pretty tricky to toenail, so I ended up settling on just drilling pallet holes for the nails, because that way it's much easier to start the nail. I know exactly where the nail will go, and there's no risk of splitting the wood. And then using a concrete nail with a point ground off as a nail set to sink those nails below the surface. Now to attach the 2x4 piece that goes on the top edge, the bevel is less favorable for toenailing, so I decided to just nail through that, but I'm also drilling pallet holes for that, again to make sure the nail goes in the right place and to avoid splitting the wood. And my nails are a little bit too short to engage that board enough, so once again I'm sinking them below the surface just to get enough penetration into the board. And this is how all the pieces fit together. The boards in the 2x4 pieces have their bevels on opposite ends, which kind of makes for a bit of an interlock where they come together. And now just some long deck screws to hold it together. I like how this way the deck screw goes into the end grain kind of at an angle, which will hold better than straight into the end grain. And with just those 2 deck screws in each corner, I was surprised how rigid the whole thing ended up. But just for good measure, I also added a screw to the middle of the board. Well, strong enough, I think. And the thing that's actually going to hold the water in is going to be the 6mm vapor barrier plastic draped over everything. I always keep a roll of this stuff handy because I use it for all kinds of stuff other than vapor barrier. I initially sized it based on the width of the vapor barrier that I had, but then I ended up making it a tiny bit smaller so that I could make it out of 2 boards instead of 3 for the surrounds. And then I took it apart again into 3 pieces so I could move those to the patio. I ended up cutting the bottom out of the previous wading pool that I almost shredded and put that in the bottom of this one so it would look less like a wooden trough because, well, that's what it is. And then some small wooden blocks screwed to the underside of the rim to hold the plastic in place.